Welcome back to the Confidence Formula. We are getting into the nitty-gritty, starting with week one and what we're actually going to start seeing on the court. So your first hump of homework is over, and now we get to the fun stuff. So we're going to cover four things. The strategy or the template I like to use is actually modeled after a physical funnel where we're starting high up, high level, and we're trying to filter slash funnel down to the brass tacks where stuff really happens, where we can make progress. So we're going to start with our tag teach instruction, which has its own funnel model of how we go through instructions. We're going to talk about how we're going to help you set priorities and how we're going to start measuring progress. And we're going to talk about the gap versus the gain in relation to measuring things and how that can affect your perspective on how well you're really doing. And then we're going to intermingle a few clips of actual court work. What we're going to be focusing on primarily this week is measuring shooting for everybody, regardless of what your specific three priorities are. And then connecting shooting footwork to driving footwork, and then the decisions between shot and drive, and actually competing in some one-on-one and two-on-two situations based on that. So lots to cover, lots of fun ahead. Tag teach is a methodology for instructions. The TAG part of it is an acronym, stands for teaching with acoustical guidance. Just means we're giving you audible feedback, something you can hear. So you don't have to look at coach to tell if his body language says you did it right or not. You're just listening. So you can be facing the basket, doing your thing, and just hearing yes is the word we like to use when you have done it correctly. So the funnel part of this is kind of three layers of instruction. So we try to give you context, kind of like how I approach coaching in general. I want you to play in a game situation, like get a feel for what it is like, what's happening, where the problems are before we really teach a skill. And so tag teach is a way of saying, like, we're going to work on shooting today. And then second layer down the funnel is we're going to work on stride stop footwork, where we catch a pass in rhythm to then jump and shoot. And then we're going to get down to left right jump as the tag point, as it's called. And so rather than giving you a fire hose of verbal vomit information all at once, which a lot of coaches are prone to do, and I'm constantly working on getting better at, we're going to kind of layer that three stacking layers down to the very precise 5-word or less tag point that's going to give you exactly what you need to know in order to execute the skill. And then we're just saying yes when you do that part correctly. And so I've started calling this the faster feedback loop, where, if you're in a skills and drills night, which I hate, you'll see, a line of 20, maybe 30 kids going through like a layup line or whatever. And maybe the coach will stop you and give you some feedback, hey, correct this, do this differently, maybe once in an hour session. And, maybe he'll stop and address the whole group once or twice during a drill. But what we're trying to do is get you like 3 feedback loops instantaneously right when you're executing the skill. And if you can do it 3 times correctly, then we're ready for the next piece. And so we just accelerate your learning by stacking really small pieces. And the term that's used, not really relevant for you, but what we call it is back chaining, what comes from the tag teach method. And so basically we're starting at an endpoint, like we're going to see in a minute with layups. We start with the last 2 steps and finish, and then we add in what our knee should be doing to go above our hip into finish, and what our ball position, hand position should be like into finish, and then add a dribble and make it 3 steps to basket finish, and then add a crossover, attack, dribble, 3 steps to finish. And so by stacking all those pieces backwards from the endpoint, you get about 20, 25 layup attempts where you're actually working on all the pieces of making the shot. But we didn't bore you to death because we were constantly adding a new step challenge all the way back to ball handling integrated to attack step, all that stuff. So I'm going to show you a video what that looks like, and we'll actually be walking through this in our first day on the court. This is kind of my way to demonstrate exactly what this feels like to have a very precise instruction and an instant feedback loop of yes when you execute that correctly. So, layup footwork. We're going to start pretty simply. We're looking for 2 steps. So I would say we're going to work on layups. We're going to position here and take 2 steps to our layup. And our tag point is 2 steps. And right when you take your second step, I say, yes, you did it correctly. And if you don't do it correctly, I'll just say, try again. Next piece we're going to work on is elbows to ears. This is great to protect the ball when you're going through traffic, something I learned from James Harden, and prevents the mini people from stripping the ball down. Then we're adding a dribble, getting our timing of bounce and left foot together, and getting all the way to the basket. And then our crossover, we're going to do what we call a skater step. We're stepping 2 tiles to the right as we cross, and then we're able to attack forward. And that whole segment together, we call an L step crossover. So we're making an L shape both with our ball and our feet. We're getting sideways as the ball bounces across, and we're getting forward with our very next step and dribble. It's like the most efficient way to integrate ball handling and footwork. And it feels really slow and awkward because you've never thought about it as much as I have before. But when you get comfortable with that, then we can get back to what a lot of people do without intentionally doing it, is like a triple step hesitation rhythm on their crossover, which slows you down and makes you less efficient if you're not doing it intentionally. So we go for simple efficiency first, and then we can build in some hesitation and different rhythms and different feet that we're attacking with, dribble timing. All that stuff evolves from there, but just raising your awareness of this foot goes here with this dribble. You feel like a awkward robot as you go through it the first time, but once you get it, you have a heightened awareness of what your feet are actually doing, which helps us a lot as we start to progress to more advanced skills. Next, we're going to talk about the 3 priorities, and this is going to be on our quiz for the week. So really just capturing, getting you to think about where you're at and where you want to go. So we're going to ask you kind of in the order of big rocks is how I like to call it. But what's the biggest thing you want to change? Like we have 12 weeks ahead of us to work together. What is the one thing that if you change nothing but that, you'd be happy? And then how would improving that impact your game, right? So maybe it's shooting. Like right now, I'm a 10% 3-point shooter. And if I could get that to 33%, which is kind of where I set the green light level. If you're on my team, you can shoot 33% from 3-point range, then I want you shooting every time you get a chance. And so thinking about, if I became a 3-point threat, how would that improve or impact my game? And then repeat that thought process for number 2. So given 3-point shooting is like taken care of, I am now a shooter. What is the next big thing that would have the biggest impact that I really want to change? And then we're going to really capture that list and figure out how we're going to measure those. And a very common one is shooting. That's why I brought it up. And that's why we have that kind of built into our curriculum. We're going to capture feedback from each of you that's in the course together and, identify what specific needs we need. But I've worked with a lot of players in your age group and your ability level. And so I kind of already know what the major things are that you're going to need help with. And so we've got a plan for those. And then we're going to fill in some of the more detailed nuance from what you guys bring from just answering these questions. So we're going to see really a fundamental of a lot of things we do are built off of a simple framework of footwork and decision making. So we're just going to see the footwork first. Next week, we're actually going to get into a lot of footwork. It's kind of the focus of the week. What we call from the sneakers up is week 2. So this is kind of preview. We're going to intro it so that you're comfortable with it, and then we can layer onto it next week. So the first thing we're doing as a right-handed shooter is stepping left foot first, and then right, and we'd get up into our shot from there. So it's a 1-2 rhythm. We call it a stride stop. It's a little faster to say, and it's just 1 foot and then the other instead of 2 feet at the same time or any other combinations you could do. And if we were a left-handed shooter, we would do the opposite. We'd go right foot first. The advantage is our strong side leg is free to attack. So if I'm right-handed, my left foot is now my pivot foot based on how I caught it. My right leg can lunge and reach past my defender. I just gain more distance out of the same footwork and dribble by doing it that way. So a lot of pieces that are built into this, but just based on building the steps we did for making a layup, we're going to connect back to that so that we can catch and shoot from this footwork. We can catch and drive and go finish our layup from that footwork. And then later on, I'll show you how we're going to play one-on-one and really get into the decision making. And then showing here the right hand dribble pull up. So we're just working one side of the body right now. We're going dominant side so that if we can shoot when we catch it, and we can drive if the defense closes out too hard, and we can pull up to that same side if they overplay containing our drive, overplay the basket, then we can score at 3 levels, as it's commonly called. We can hit the three, drive the layup, hit the pull up if they take away the first two, and we can really become very difficult to guard with just having those 3 options going one direction and then building the speed of decision making into that, which we're going to talk about next. We can talk about how we're measuring decision speed and all the rest of that. Favorite saying of mine related to this topic is simply, what is measured improves, period. And this is from a management and efficiency consultant, Peter Drucker. The story I remember from him is that he was coming up with a lot of ideas of how to make iterative improvements in like manufacturing, and like nobody in the US was really interested. So he went over to Japan and they were like, this is the best idea ever. And companies like Toyota really adopted that and started measuring everything and making really small changes that stacked up over time to be a huge advantage as a manufacturing efficiency of, cars and robotics and everything else that Toyota now makes. And then later, when he came back to the States, he was famous because he had helped all these Japanese companies really take off with their productivity. So I like to talk about measuring specifics, even if they're ugly, is what I put on here. So like a lot of players like don't want to look at their stats if they're bad, or they don't want to look at, their three-pointing percentage, whatever that may be. You might not want to look at like how inefficient you actually are as a ball handler, like getting past somebody, but wherever that is, like I encourage players to take the approach of we're just measuring a baseline. Like if we don't measure it, we don't know where we are and we don't know if we improved over time. So like we have to measure it. And then my role is kind of like making you stare at that, right? So like we'll have player come in, like we're going to do 25 shot tests as part of our first night on the court. And we're going to capture how many shots out of 25 can you make from 3-point distance, because that's like the extreme. If you're an okay shooter, you might be good in like 15 to 17 feet. If you're a great shooter, you'll still be good out to 3-point range. And if you're not a good shooter, it'll just show up even more drastically out at 3-point range. So we do that as baseline tests. Like, can you hit a three? So like somebody might hit 5 out of 25 shots, right? And they're shooting 20%. And they feel terrible about themselves. But the best part of that is that it's just first night of 24 nights on the court and 24 hours of work together. And so by the end of that 24 hours of improving your footwork and your rhythm and your decision making and your actual upper body shot mechanics, like then it's like infinity improvement, right? Depending on how you measure the relative percentage. But if they go from 5 out of 25 to 10 out of 25, like that is a 100% improvement, right? He's now making 5 more shots than the original 5. Or you could say he went from 20% to 40%, real 3-point percentage. Either way, it's like an incredible achievement when you can do that. And, I'm very confident doing that because I've done a lot of times with players now. Like, give me 12 weeks and like we're gonna blow this metric out of the water from where we started, and gets me excited. So common ways to measure. So if you're thinking about your priorities, we just covered of how you're going to think about what are the big things, then I want you to think about how we're going to measure those. So one of my favorite simple ways is just out of 10 times. So we could say out of 10 shots, if it's a certain type of shot, maybe your left hand pull-up is weak. Like right now you can only hit 2 out of 10 going left hand dribble pull-up. And so we could measure, hey, out of 10 times now, how many can you make? And 6 weeks from now and 12 weeks from now, how many can you hit? With no defense, like nothing else there, just like technical ability, we can measure that. Another common one is ball handling. I mentioned ball handling effectiveness is what I like to talk about, but how well can you get past a defender that's similar size ability to you and actually score? And for a lot of players, that's like one or two. Most of the time, I'm having to shoot over them and take a bad shot. So, like, can we increase our ball handling ability to get past somebody 7 or 8 times out of 10 and actually find a really good shot? And the third common one is decision speed. So most players will take 3 or 4 seconds on average between when they touch the ball and when they actually attack. Now, a lot of players, instead of holding the ball, which kind of looks bad, they will dribble the ball. They'll do like 5 crossovers while their brain is buffering, is what I call it. We're going to get into more about decision speed, but basically, I'll just sit there with a stopwatch or a verbal count and say 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000, and watch you attack. And we're going to just capture that. And then we can say, all right, our goal is 1 second between touch and attack. And it's not we're going to finish a shot or finish a layup in 1 second, but we're going to make the decision to do our next action inside of 1 second. And so then we can go from 4 seconds to 1 second. We can say we have a 300% increase in speed or decrease in time used. And that can be a really exciting one. That one's just like changing how you think. We don't have to change really anything about your skill level or anything about your athleticism. It's like the biggest lever in the world is like making decisions faster so that the defense never has a chance to keep up. And we're going to spend a lot of time on that as we get going. All right, the gap and the gain is the last thing on here. These are kind of talking about the same thing, but I like to talk about stacking evidence. Like to have confidence, you really need a skill stack, but then you also need a stack of proof. Like I have done this so many times that it's like automatic. Kind of what I just said about myself as coach is like I've done so many players improving their shooting percentage drastically over a given 12-week period that it's like I just know that it's going to change and improve. And so the difference here is that you could say your ideal big goal in the future is really inspiring, is like, I want to play college basketball, or even I want to play in the NBA, right? But if you're always looking at that and comparing yourself to it, you feel terrible. It's like, I'm nowhere near a college level player right now. I don't know how to get there. And all this work I'm doing, like, doesn't seem to be making much difference. Like, I'm still playing with the same guys on the same team and still struggled the same way. And so contrasting that versus what I just said about stacking evidence is what we call the gap in the gain. What is called the gap in the gain is actually a concept from a business coach named Dan Sullivan, a guy I like to talk about a lot. He's got a lot of great ideas, really from the business, mentorship, entrepreneurship world, but somehow everything translates to basketball in my head. So the gap is that big ideal future. And the gain is simply turning around and looking backwards at your progress. And so most players don't track anything like the age and level you're at in basketball. Like there's hardly any stats, there's hardly any video available. Like you don't really know what your metrics are. And so like it's hard to look in the past and see. And so my one of my goals for you is to start tracking that. And we do that through everything we just talked about. Our discovery process was part of that. Our eval on the court was part of that. And all the metrics we're going to be measuring this week on the court all stacks up there. And then we use our play practice database on the home court app so that you have video evidence of your progress. And like you can go back and like chuckle at yourself 3 weeks from now about how you looked when you were trying to lay up the first time with our specific instructions, and then you doing it someday in the future in a game at full speed and like destroying defenses with how efficient your footwork is to get to a layup. And that would be the gain, right? Just measuring like, okay, I was 2 for 10 or I was 2 for 25 on 3-point land on our eval or our first day on the court measuring our 25 shot test. And now I'm making 5 out of 25, right? That improvement is showing gains. And no matter what the timeline is you're looking at, if you look at week 1 to week 2, or yesterday to today, or last year to this year, whatever the timeline is, if you're looking for gains, you will find proof. You will find evidence stacking up of your progress. And so really the gap in the gain concept works best if you use both. You use the inspiring ideal future. Like, I do want to go play college basketball. That's why I'm going to go out, practice in the cold, in the rain, in the driveway to work on this. But I have to also use the gains in order to keep me motivated and keep proving to myself that I am making progress, that this is worthwhile, and that from last season to this season, I've made a big step forward, even though it doesn't always feel like it. And the real thing about that ideal future is that it's like a moving goalpost, right? You might say you wanted to get on this AAU team, and then you made it on that AAU team, but you were on the bench, so then you were disappointed. But the year before, you would have never been able to make it on that team. You would have been cut at tryouts. And so like, you lose sight of what you did do to get where you wanted because you moved the goalpost to the next thing you wanted, because you're always looking toward that ideal future. So last piece on the court is our one-on-one closeout. So this is really our first example of decision making, and we like to use our tool here called the realistic to exaggerate this. I always say my white arm blends into the white wall up here behind us as defense, and so you might not recognize whether the hand was up or not, but with the big black stick in your eyes, you're definitely going to know. You're not going to shoot if that's in your face. You're going to drive, and if it's down, you'll have clear vision of the basket and you can shoot. And that's really what our decision making starts from. So this is how we're going to play it when you're on the court. You'll be playing against other players, probably not against coaches, because we got a group of more competitive athletes. But what we want to do is shoot always. And then if the stick is up, we drive. And connecting this to our footwork, we're doing our stride stop. We're catching left, right if we're a right-handed shooter, and we're ready to shoot. We only look at driving if the hand is up in our way, in this case, the stick. And by doing that way, we don't have to take our eyes off the basket. I'm looking at the basket. If there's a hand between my eyes and the basket, I'll see it and I know I'm driving. If there's no hand, I already shot it. I didn't have to think about it. And we'll talk about how the order of operations stacks up so that those are not equal options, right? If I was looking at driving first, the defense would be able to predict my drive and not have to come and guard my shot. But if I shoot first, they have to respect my shot, and then I can also drive. So they're not equal options. We need to have a move before we have a counter move, and know which one comes first greatly simplifies basketball and allows us to make then really quick decisions, which is the ultimate goal of all this. Footwork connected to decision making, connected to speed of execution, so the defense never catches up. All right, quick summary. 5 words or less. We're doing our tag teach method. Here's what we're going to do. Here's why we're going to do it that way. Here's what it's called. Now, knee above hip on your layup is one of our tag points. When you do it, we say yes. If you do it 3 times, we're done and we're moving on really quickly. 3 priorities. We want to know what's the biggest rock for you, what impact it's going to have on your game, and do that for the top 3 things you can come up with, and then figure out how we're going to measure that progress, starting from what may be an ugly baseline for you, but starting to measure that gain and keeping our eyes on the prize with the big ideal future only as inspiration, rather than comparing ourselves to something that is moving constantly. Like I said, we're never going to reach our ideal because our ideal keeps growing as we grow as a player. We need to have this backward looking, tracking stats, measuring our absolute stack of proof and evidence that we are making gains. And then we're going to work on the court, mostly with footwork and decision making this week, trying to get you really comfortable with your feet and then really fast with your decisions so that you can shoot or drive. The defender can't possibly stop both, and you can start to destroy any defender however you want by just doing 2 simple things really well and really efficiently. So that's it for week number 1. I look forward to seeing you on the court.